Hello, my friends, and welcome to another fresh episode of Heavy Hyena. This week, we'll be looking at YouTube right-wing commentator cringe-lord, The Britisher. Let's see what he's got to say about the subject of Martin Luther King and the modern Black Lives Matter movement.
Why did Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi succeed?
Oh, we're not using our real voices. We're using a silly put-on posh voice. Well, brilliant. Because using a plummy British accent is absolutely my raison d'etre.
It's a simple question. Neither had an army. Neither had real power. But the answer is simple, and the answer is very significant in the here and now, albeit that it might not necessarily prove popular in certain circles. The primary reason they succeeded was because they were not up against China, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and so on. The two men faced the United States of America and the British Empire, respectively. Had they instead confronted King Leopold of Belgium's colony of Congo, they would have been dead in an instant.
Well, it's sort of a good point, as long as you leave out one very, very significant and important detail. And that is, absolutely those two wouldn't have had to be victorious had there been nothing to be victorious against. Without the oppression of the British and American empires, any form of uprising would have been absolutely unnecessary. You see, old boy, you seem to have lost all sight of rationality. In actual fact, your desperation to paint the colonialists as the good guys has led you into the absurd state of affairs where you're trying to credit the victories of rebels to those they were rebelling against. It's such a stark, raving, mad position that there's not really any sensible way to engage with it.
The secret of their success lay in the advanced civilization of the peoples they faced. Yes, indeed, the terrible racist American regime, the horrible British imperial power. It was in fact the civility, restraint and liberalism of the civilizations which were being blamed, which ever allowed for Martin Luther King and Gandhi to succeed.
I sincerely wonder sometimes if people such as this poorly accented buffoon genuinely believe the absolute tripe they come out with, or whether they're simply playing word games. This comes from a kind of bizarre subculture of the debate bro, where extreme manipulations of language take the place of actual logic. I mean, layered into this is a sort of odd case of whataboutism, where we're supposed to credit a slave-taking, race-oppressing, exploitative colonial power for not being as utterly distasteful as some others. But, quite frankly, who gives a shit? None of the West's linguistic liberalism gives them some sort of pass to oppress people, and anyone who believes it does is an absolute shao. The right wing have an extremely unusual relationship with characters like Martin Luther King. Widely recognized in our society as a hero, he stood for everything that they stand against. He was an anti-racist and a socialist. So quite frequently, on the one hand, they try to denounce him, but on the other, they try to claim that they are the real Martin Luther Kings of the modern era, for doing things like complaining for being chucked off Twitter for doing racism. It's like, make up your goddamn minds. But the truth is, it's a really weaselly and pathetic attitude that underlies this confusion. What's in fact going on is they despise Martin Luther King and everything he stood for. But they're also aware that if they reveal this too early, it will turn all polite society against them, and therefore they manipulate language to pretend that in some way they are on the same side, but they never were.
Now, today's generation of protesters wish to emulate these figures, wish to have their own march on Selma, their own march to the sea.
No, old boy, they absolutely do not. What they would wish is that none of this is necessary. What they would wish is that police aren't murdering black people. What they would wish to be treated with the same dignity and respect that everyone else is. This is not some game, although it may appear so to you, because all of this is a game to you. But real-life people are being real-life killed. And while you go on the internet with a silly, fake, posh accent, pretending to be something that you're not, they are facing real-life difficulties, something that I may doubt you ever have. Although, to be fair, judging from your your poorly executed fake posh accent, and those regional twangs which sometimes escape between your utterances, my guess is that you're probably working class. And of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being working class, but there is a special kind of weaselly toadying about a working class person who bootlicks those above him on the social hierarchy. My guess is that we're dealing here with a veritable class traitor. And just like me, my audience, the class that you seek to emulate is laughing at you because they have convinced you that you should work for your own oppression, and they will absolutely never see you as one of their own.
But are they still aware that they in fact face a very civil opponent?
Yes, for God's sake, these black people, when they are having their brothers and sisters and children and fathers and mothers being shot like dogs in the street, do they really realize that those that are doing the shooting are civilized, whatever that means? How absolute dare they not be more appreciative of that fact?
Is their zeal to emulate someone such as Martin Luther King matched with the moral force of a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi?
I suppose it bears repeating, they only have an interest in emulating those figures, insofar as it helps them to emancipate themselves from the predicament that they're stuck in. On our side, it's not a LARP. To be able to LARP, which I'm sure you know something about, you have to come from a particular perspective of extraordinary privilege. But for those that you're deriding, there is no space for LARPing, because what they're attempting to do is survive.
Do they actually have aims?
Yes.
Or is the aim itself to be a movement like that once led by Martin Luther King?
No.
Is this really about achieving something?
Yes.
Or about sharing in a movement?
No.
Is this real?
Yes.
Or just a pretense?
No. Alright, that's enough of the accent. I'm sure it'd be so much easier for people like this Wally if it was just a pretense. Because fundamentally their worldview just can't tolerate the truth that some people have a unfair shake in this system. It's not that they don't know that that's true, it's that they know if they admitted it and admitted that they didn't care, or in fact, in many cases, actively encouraged that unfairness, then they wouldn't really be able to sell that very well to people. So they end up doing these ridiculous, fraudulent, nonsense things that even they know is nonsense. Everyone knows it's nonsense. The only people that swallow it are people that are going around looking for some kind of excuse to justify the nonsense that they believe, and the suppression and oppression they want to put onto vulnerable people.
Now, for one, they seem to veer from one course to another pretty quickly. At the time of making this video, it's defund the police. But we've also had statue toppling and demands regarding police brutality. It's very difficult to see how toppling statues of Christopher Columbus combine with demands about policing.
It's not very hard to see. It's only hard to see if you're an idiot. Because obviously they're protesting systemic oppression, of which both police brutality and the exhibition of slave traders as statues around our towns and cities is both a part. And quite frankly, I think you should be embarrassed, because I know you can clearly tell what links these things. Everyone knows what links these things. And really, pretending to be as stupid as you're pretending to be is the only thing that's less dignified than the ridiculous and not very well constructed fake accent you're doing. It's basically the equivalent of saying, well, Martin Luther King didn't have clear aims, because on the one hand, he wanted to allow black people to sit anywhere they wanted on the bus, but on the other hand, he also led the Memphis sanitation workers strike, and what has buses and sanitation got to do with each other? Well, it's that essential piece of what they've got to do with each other that is the whole reason for all of this to be happening.
They have come to believe that they are part of historical change, that the one event which sparked it, in this case the death of George Floyd while under police arrest in Minneapolis, is the big moment, the fulcrum of history, and that they are the ones who now must act to see through the change which is only waiting to happen.
I can only imagine that this is part of the extreme insecurity of the right wing, and that in many ways the right wing kind of wish they were the left wing. It's sort of a bit like that thing of Paul Joseph Watson claiming that the right wing was the modern counterculture. The right wing wishes that they were part of history, wishes that they were part of the sea of change and the march of progress. But the historical moments that they were part of tend to be pretty dicey, and history tends to remember the right wing as the bad guys, because let's face it, they were and are. And every time there's any kind of heroic character like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Lincoln or whoever, you can absolutely bank on the right wing to come together and try to prevent the progress from happening and join in the side that history will remember as the bad guys every single time. And that must get kind of a bit wearing, I suppose. The bare minimum, it's sort of embarrassing. It's cringe, basically. And so when these kind of moments happen in real time, because history won't forget what's happening today, let's be honest. When these moments are happening, the right kind of feels left out. I mean, the closest they had was that Charlottesville Unite the Right thing, with all the Nazis and whoever else clubbing together to LARP around the streets, you know. It's embarrassing. And very quickly, the rest of the right kind of sought to distance themselves from that movement. I mean, that's what happens all the time. The right does something that history remembers as being totally f***ed up, and then the modern right tries to distance themselves from their past while still trying to do the same things again in the future. I mean, and in the case of Charlottesville, that was all happening in real time. Amazing. But, I mean, you know, here's the unfortunate truth for the right wing. This is happening whether you want it to or not. This progress will be made, and history will remember you guys as the bad guys, because you are.